Welcome back to Relationships Over Reps with coaches Rich LANSKY and Johnny Parker. Thank you for joining us again. One of the things that we talked about in our last podcast was about the interchangeability and relationship between reliability and accountability, both on the part of the coach and on the athlete, and how that builds trust. And that was going to bring us into today's topic, how that trust manifests itself as we get to know our athletes, and we know when to push them, when not to push them, when to increase their weight, when to back them off. And I'm going to bring Johnny Parker in to talk a little bit about some of those things.
Coach, thank you very much. I am looking forward to this topic today about the eye of the coach. And one thing that I want to say about building trust and all of that with your athletes, that's this: is be the same person every day. And on top of that, maybe even more important, is you can't have a star system in your program. And by that I mean some of the guys that think that they're stars, that entitles them to maybe slide a little bit or don't do the things that are the hardest, or a lot of things, a lot of ways that they would feel entitled. And I can remember in San Francisco, the first day, first group, I said, you guys that think you're stars and that entitles you to something, you're right. It does. It entitles you to work harder than everybody else. So I wanted to get that in somewhere. But if you do have a star system where there's a different set of rules for the stars than for the second teamers, then there are two groups of people that will resent you for it. The down the line guys that have to obey all rules, and then the stars who know that you're not giving them, you are entitling them when they already feel entitled, and really a lot of them want to be pushed. If they're real players, then they want to be pushed.
You know, in one way that you can really destroy a team is when you have different standards for different people on the team. The standard has to be consistent, and you owe it to those athletes to enforce that consistency. And the standard is the standard, and your expectations shouldn't change regardless of whether that guy is the number one guy at his position, or that guy is a walk-on, or that guy is the third guy on the depth chart, or even farther down. You need to give each guy the amount of attention, the amount of love, the amount of caring, and sometimes the same amount of a kick in the butt when they need it.
Coach, a kid that we had in San Francisco named Anthony Adams, he was a defensive tackle from Penn State, and in an interview, he said this, that Johnny Parker is the same guy every day. He's hard on all of us. And that's why I love Johnny Parker.
When you look at it, that's the best compliment a coach can have. Being the same guy every day to the same, regardless of who you're dealing with, and treating everybody the same. I think the world would be a better place if we treated everybody alike, don't you?
Yes, I agree with you. The world would be a better place if we treated everybody alike. Now,
Let's shift gears a little bit and get back into that idea that we talked about yesterday, the eye of the coach. What you had told me a story before that when you had gone over to the Soviet Union before the wall fell on that trip with some other NFL coaches, you had asked some questions of some of the professors there at the Institute of Sport, and they came back with the line, the eye of the coach. Tell us about that a little bit.
Coach, you just told my story. I had a whole list of questions I wanted to ask these Soviet coaches. And it seemed like every time I asked, they would say, well, that depends on the eye of the coach. Man, I heard that so many times. And I was really disappointed. And when I got back to the States, I thought, man, I went all the way over there, spent 2 weeks over there, and I didn't get what I went for. And then over time, I realized, Coach, that they were right. That if it doesn't look right, then it probably isn't right. So if you see kids really dragging, struggling to get through a workout, then you, you can see that you made the workout too hard. And you can't be afraid to stop right in the middle of a workout and tell the kids, hey, it's my fault, but this workout is too hard. So change, make these changes. And I would tell them I wanted the weights lighter or the sets and reps fewer, uh, to get it to where the bar was humming. They could move it so fast. But, Coach, the eye of the coach really should determine about everything you do. You can't just lay out a workout program and then expect everybody to do it just that way, because for some it's too much, some it's not enough, and for some it's just right. But when I can't say this enough, when it doesn't look right, then it probably isn't right. And when I say doesn't look right, again, I'm talking about bar speed, jumps in between sets of squats, uh, and just players in general dragging. So I have to step in, reduce the workout, and get the bar moving again.
As I developed a comfort level relationship, as I got to know these athletes, um, at the high school level, when I was at Manatee or Braden River. And after about a year, of seeing these guys every day, pretty much during the week, Monday through Friday, sometimes Saturdays, and really assessing, what their baseline was as far as their central nervous system output, their twitch, so to speak, quote unquote, how, what they should look like when they were on, when they were rested, when they got a good night's sleep, when they weren't stressed out about personal life or about school or about work, what happened when they got a good breakfast in them before or a good dinner the night before. When you have that baseline, then, like you said, if the bar is moving slower than it should be, if when they're landing on their jumps, things are buckling, they're not eccentrically catching themselves the way they normally do and stabilize. Those are the times like you step in, and vice versa. If we're going up, sometimes we'll have a day where it's a high central nervous system output power day, and we're doing cleans or snatches from the blocks or from the floor, and we're just going. And in my mind, we're at 90% plus if everything goes well, and they look great, and the kids are going. And I can look at lifter A on the first platform and say, hey, you go up 10 pounds. I can look at lifter B on the second platform and say, hey, you're going up 25 pounds based on what I know their current max is and how the bar looks. And I think that I, the coach, goes to the sign of when people talk about the science of coaching and the art of coaching, it's really the art of coaching, being able to take what you know from the science and apply it to the person, the individual. I'm sure you've got some similar instances that you want to share with us.
Coach, after a while, when you prepare the night before for the next day, and I don't mean write the next day's program the night before, I had already written, but just look at it and keep it fresh in your memory. And you might make some notes about things to look out for. Watch Joe Smith. This might be too much for him. Things like that. Um, after a while, you can just look at a workout and know whether you hit it or you really missed it. And coach, if I can, all right, coach, I've got a story about preparing the night before that I think is of great value, but it doesn't fit in with either. Well, it does. It does. And of course, it's about Coach Parcells, but you just let me know if it's not today, the next time we meet, whenever. But I want to get this story, and I call it Western Movies.
I cannot wait to hear about Western movies. Go ahead.
I used to really worry about Coach Parcells because he put so much pressure on himself and he put so much into his job that I was always worried that one day he would say, "Hey, I just can't do this anymore. I just can't. I've got to, I've got to have a life, and this is all I do." So I try to think of a way to get him to relax a little bit. And I came up with a brilliant idea. We'll see how brilliant it was. That one day when I came in and Coach came down to work out, I said, "Coach, you like Western movies, don't you?" And he said, "Yeah, I do." And I said, "Well, and Coach, you like those older ones better, don't you?" And he said, "Nothing better than a John Wayne movie." And I said, "Well, Coach, I've got DVDs of a lot of Western movies. Why don't I bring in a few that you can watch when you go home at night and get your mind off the job?" And he just said, "No, he kind of muttered, 'No, I can't do that.' And then, so dumb me, I pressed the issue. I said, 'Sure you can, Coach. You ain't got to watch the whole movie. Just watch 15 to 20 minutes. Get your mind away from football.' Oh, I don't, I can't do that." I mean, that's about the way he sounded. And then I still, I still didn't get it. And so I said, "Coach, just let me bring in a few and you can watch. If you don't like it, just tell, you stop." And he said, "John," and I knew I was in trouble then. JP when I was good, John when I was in trouble. "John," and I'm going to leave out some adjectives here. "John, when I go home at night, I think about what groups or individuals that I'm not getting enough out of. And then I think about what individuals or groups that perhaps I push too hard and I need to give them a little praise." So he said, "And then I think about creating circumstances that will allow me to do what I need to do the next day." So, in other words, he creates circumstances where an individual or group, you know, demonstrated that he had more to give. And Coach Parcells gently reminded him of that. Or he, he, there was a individual or groups that he had just, pushed too far. And Coach, that was really a lesson for me. Is in the night before, I always think about who do I need to build up and who do I need to kick in the rear end. And that really helped me a lot. So I want to share that with you. Uh, and Coach, I think that is of value to every coach.
Um, I look at it almost like the other side of the coin for myself, and some people might do this. I like to do a reflection first on what happened that day or that week. And, everybody looks over reps and sets. Did we make our reps at what percentage, or did we make our runs on time? Or, did the athlete, were they able to complete this metabolic workout, whatever it might have been. But I think we all look at that and make the adjustments. That's the science. But the art is, I'll look back and I'll say to myself, did I circulate around that weight room enough that I gave everybody in that room some kind of feedback that helped them become better that day? And then the other part is, did I circulate around that room and acknowledge each person in that room that they were there and that I know that they were there and I appreciate them being there and they were working? Because sometimes I'll videotape a session. I'll just put my phone up by the speakers that we don't use. I'll turn it on and I'll just let it run for 20 or 30 minutes, and I'll look back and I'll realize, guess what, Lansky? You forgot to go to platform number 7 in the corner and give any feedback to those freshmen. And based on that reflection, based on whatever I did not do or what I think I did well, because they're both parts of reflection, I would then plan for that next day, just like you were talking about, or like Parcells was talking about. I'll plan for that next day to make sure that, on one hand, I do my job as part of an authentic coach, that I'm giving input, I'm giving encouragement, I'm giving correction when needed, and that as a result, hopefully my athletes are getting better, and they're going to respond by giving me the hard work because they know that they're being acknowledged, they're being watched, and they're being coached. I'm sure you have something similar to that.
You took my my story and took it a step further. And Coach, I did that too, not to the extent of that I think you did, but Coach, every day I tried to make sure that every player that came in was felt seen, felt felt special, that it felt that he was valued, and I had to figure out something every day, to make to recognize those athletes that were doing everything in their power to get better. So I understand, Coach. I think that I was, I think that I was fairly good at that, and that's about the most I'll say about myself. But um, Coach, because I would get bored of just sets and reps and all of this, and I would get tired of that, and I'd want for me as well as for the player. Ask them about their girlfriend, or ask them about their grades, or maybe their mama had been in the hospital. Ask how their mama was doing. I tried to do that with every player every day. I didn't want a single player to leave that room for that day not feeling that he was valued.
Coach, I think you just hit the nail on the head once again. You're pretty good with that hammer, you know that? I mean, you used a couple of terms right there: value, special, and recognition. I'm going to add something to that, and that's going to be acknowledgement. I think every one of our athletes, whether they are a high school football player or a soccer player, lacrosse player, a professional football player, a baseball player, a little league um, middle school athlete, or even a master's athlete whose better days are behind them when the bar's not moving as fast and the weights aren't as heavy, but they're still in there working hard every day and competing at their age group. Every one of them wants to have those things acknowledged. They want to feel that they have value, especially in the eyes of somebody like ourselves that puts time into them and spends so much time with them. They want to feel special, and they want to be recognized for their efforts. They want to be recognized. And we go back to something you and I talked about years ago. Everybody wants to be recognized, even the kid that misbehaves in class or the cut up on the field when you're trying to talk to the guys about what we're doing and they're cracking jokes or they're saying stuff. They're looking for recognition either because they feel they're not getting recognition for positive, so they'll do something negative to get recognition, but they're still looking for recognition. So why not turn that into something positive?
Coach, again, I agree with everything that you said. And let me tell you about this making them feel special. There was a kid I coached in high school, and my last year there was his sophomore year, but he was going to be a good player. He was one of my linebackers, and his name was Van Phillips. But he was 5'9", 175, so no chance of him playing in college. But he had every opportunity to be a darn good high school player. But anyway, we lost touch with each other, and one afternoon, it's a Sunday afternoon, I think, in the off season, phone rings at home in his van, and he'd got my number somehow and called. He wanted to call and just say hello and you know what you up to, how you been, all that kind of stuff. And so as we talked about the years that have between our last interaction, and you could tell he was really proud of his children. And I said, Van, are they having a good sports experience in high school? He said, well, yes, sir, they are, but there's nobody to make them feel special. Well, you know how when you hear something, hey, I need to think about that, or I need to really give that a lot of thought and and see exactly what that means and how I can apply it. And what I realized is that making them feel special is a key to everything. Because when they feel special, they expect more of themselves. And you can expect more of them. You can push harder when you, at the same time, make them feel special. Coach, to me, it's the key to everything, is making the kids feel special. And you can get on them harder when they don't do what they should on a test, or if they miss a tackle, and you go over the reasons why they missed it. But Coach, that was one of the most valuable things that anybody ever told me, is make them feel special. And I thank Van Phillips for that. And that's Cindy Courtney changing my life. That was the most impactful thing in my life. This was probably second. And Coach, I may as well, since I'm doing all this talking, I would say the third very impactful moment in my career was when old Stan Bennett was in my Mississippi history class, and Stan was only in school because he had to be, not because he wanted to be. And he'd much rather been out fishing or hunting than being in my class. But anyway, at the end of the year, I told the kids to write any thought that they had about how I could be a better teacher, how I could help the next year's class learn more. Oh, anyway, very few of them did it. And I told them they didn't have to sign it. And a few that did write it didn't sign it. But old Stan signed his. And here's what he said. He said, Coach Parker, instead of telling me you're going to whip my rear end every day, I wish you'd just go ahead and do it. And Coach, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. There are a lot of things that should only be told once. Like, no chewing gum in class. That should only be told once. I shouldn't stand up there and remind, now, any y'all are chewing gum, you need to get rid of it, and do that every day. Those one time, then consequences for failure to act on it. Then but if you issue the same threats day after day, they tune you out and you just become a nag. And Stan Bennett really reminded me to have a much shorter period of allowing him to get away with whatever he was doing. But instead of telling me every day that you're going to whip my rear end, I wish you'd just go ahead and do it. And I think he was exactly right. That's what I should have been dealing with those kids. So anyway, Coach, those are 1, 2, and 3 about impact on my career.
Remember, something else you told me when we first met that goes back. It's easier to lighten up than tighten up. In other words, when you get there and you set those expectations, we as coaches, to control the temperature of that room, to gauge it and keep it where we want, we need to make sure that the expectations are understood from the very beginning. And then I tell the kids all the time, if they first come in, how come we don't play music? I said, we may play music at some point once we get all our other work done. But in the beginning, we're focused on learning our technique and making sure that we know how to work. If I have to tell you guys not to stop dancing because the music's on, then we're not working. But at some point, maybe on a day, I do play some music and put on some Motown for the kids. So I was able to lighten up. But if I play music every day and then all of a sudden I take it away, that's not the message either, because then it's a punishment. So I think it's important that you said that we enforce or follow through with the things we say we're going to, and not just in discipline, but even in anything that we do. In other words, if I say that I'm going to be there for every one of your district, regional, and state meets, even if I'm not the coach, but I say I'm going to be there, I better be there. Because the minute I'm not there, I've weakened that relationship and I've broken that trust. And going back to last podcast, now my reliability is in question. And that relationship will be fractured, and it's really hard, if impossible, to build back trust, as we talked about on the last podcast. I wanted to switch gears a little bit when we talk about impact. And we talked about things that impacted your career. Let's talk a little bit about how a coach can impact an athlete's career or an athlete's perspective on things. And it can be weight room, it can be on the field, it can be in the classroom, it can be in life. But let's go back and look back on something that happened during the last half century for each of us. I'm going to start with you, my man.
Well, Coach, first of all, the first coaching clinic I ever went to was up in Jackson, Tennessee. A big Tennessee booster invited the new coach, Bill Battle, who was the youngest head coach in America, just 28, but invited him and his staff to come down and put on a clinic in his, I forget what, he had some big showroom. He was I think a car dealer. Anyway, doesn't matter. I don't remember anything Coach Battle said except this. If your kids can be around you for 3 or 4 years and not be better people, you're in the wrong business. Coach, I heard that. It sunk deep into my bones. And Coach, that was we owe that to the kids, to set a standard not only of performance, but a standard of behavior, a standard of language. And Coach, I just think that when you set a standard and then you don't yield on it, and then kids begin to accept it, and but anyway, Coach, and now how can you make them better people? Well, here's my answer: is first of all, Gandhi said this: be the change you want to see. And at first that didn't make sense to me, but then I realized is if you want to see a change in, say, in the way people act or talk around you, be the change that you want to see. Be a person that people just know that I really shouldn't cuss around this guy. I should, I should do my best for this guy. Uh, you just live the life that you want others to live. And Coach, I always come back in my mind to the beautiful, beautiful hymn. Surely the presence of the Lord is in this place. And if you're not familiar with it, please YouTube it and get the version by a group called Daywind. One word, but it's Daywind. And I bring that up because, Coach, as you know, I'm a Christian or try to be. And it's important for people to see Christ in me. And I'm not going to preach here, but, Coach, I try to be the person that I want them to be. And Coach, that's very, very important to me, is to try to make sure that everybody is a better person when they leave me than they were when I got them.
Coach, you have just, for lack of a better word, preached, and in a great way. When they say, walk the walk, don't just talk the talk, they don't realize that it has a biblical base. I mean, let your yes be yes, let your no be no. Don't make vows, but actually let your actions speak for yourselves. I think we are called as believers. One of the things that really opened up my eyes when I became a believer, that I thought in the past that I was coaching for the right reasons. But then I realized that coaching and teaching was my calling or my ministry, and that was put on my heart by God, and that we are called to bring glory to God in everything we do, and that includes in the way we deal with people. Because I remember when in the Bible they talked about the two greatest commandments, love your God and love your neighbor. The idea is how we deal with each other and how we respect and glorify God should really be two of the mainstays in what we do as coaches or teachers and how we deal with people, wouldn't you say?
Coach, I couldn't possibly agree more. And Coach, I know in this day and time that you're not supposed to mention religion or your faith. And if that offends anybody, tough, because I serve my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, with my life. And I'm not ashamed to admit it. And I'm certainly not going to be told that I can't uh, express my faith to other people. Now, Coach, I don't go out and stand on a street corner and try to preach to everybody. But, Coach, I try to live a life that people will see Christ in me. And I think that's a lot more effective than preaching to them. So anyway, Coach, that's my sermon for the day. And again, if anybody's offended, too bad.
Coach, actions speak louder than words, and that's one of the things that I'm really focused on is people should know where you are in your relationship with the Lord and your character, and by how you treat others and by your actions, by the fruit of your labor. I mean, when you really look at things, are you coaching for the benefit of the kids, the athletes, the young men and women, the older men and women that we deal with? Are you coaching to help them? Are you coaching because you want to make them feel special? Are you coaching to help them achieve their dreams? Are you coaching to help them build their character? Or are you coaching so you can have your 15 minutes on social media talking about how great a coach you are and what you did? Well, in the past, that may have been part of me, what I did and this, but now, since looking at things from a deeper perspective and accepting Jesus as my Lord, I know that it's not about me. Everything's about Him, and how can I bring glory to Him, and how I can repay Him for the sacrifice that He made to wash me clean. How can I repay Him? And I can repay Him at this time, I feel called, by making a difference in other people's lives, and that's through coaching and teaching. So I don't think we need to apologize for what our motivations are. because it's deeper than what's quote unquote politically correct. As we close out this podcast on a I the Coach story, or an I the Coach story.
Well, Coach, I, I can kind of lump a bunch of experiences into one thing, and that's this: is that you can't be afraid to stop a workout and tell the group, "Hey, fellas, I made this too hard. Y'all are trying, as hard as you can to cover my mistake, and I appreciate it. I respect it, but we've got to lighten up here. We got to lighten up." And I want to apologize to you, and I want to tell you how much I respect your effort in trying to make my mistake in right. And so make these changes. And I would tell them how we're going to lighten up the rest of the workout. But you can't be embarrassed to say this. When a kid asks you a question, you can't be embarrassed to say, "I don't know, but I will know tomorrow because I'm going to research it, when I get home." So all of those things make you a little more human. And I don't know if they increase trust or what they do, but it's the right thing to do. And, that solves a lot of issues, is do the right thing. Or on the other hand, Bob Knight's list of rules was, don't do anything I might not like.
I've heard that Bob Knight line a couple times from you, and I agree with that. Um, I think when we admit some fault on our parts, it creates two things in the perspective of the athlete. One, it shows them that we're human and we make mistakes just like they do. But more important, it shows them that we can own up to our mistakes. And now we're modeling behavior. Our actions are speaking. We're saying that when we make a mistake, we own up for it and we admit the mistake. And I really like what you had said about, I don't have the answer for that, but I'll find out. Because I learned a long time ago, the worst thing you can do is basically make believe you know something. Well, there's no other way to say it. You lie about something. You make believe that you know something that you don't. And you might give the wrong information. So a lot of times it shows you more responsibility, or it demonstrates more responsibility for you to say, "I'm not sure how that works. I remember reading something about that, but I'm not sure, and I don't want to give you the wrong answer. So let me call up, or let me reach out to one of my contacts so I can get you the right answer that you deserve." And I think that's a very, very important thing that young coaches need to probably, and teachers, and people in any field need to recognize and adapt, is that we're not supposed to know everything. It's great if we know where we can go to find that out. But the idea is draw upon the people around you to help you answer the questions that you don't know. Because honesty is a great way to build trust and to build relationships.
Coach, you wouldn't say this, and you're going to deny it, but a lot of times when I would tell a kid, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm going to find out, and I'm going to research it, and I will know the answer tomorrow. Coach, a lot of times that researching it and finding out the best way to do it would be to call this weightlifting coach down in Bradenton, Florida, that you might know. His name is LANSKY. And calling him and asking him, "How do you do this?" or what is a cue to help them correct this flaw in a lift, whatever. You had ready answers. It worked for anything that I needed. And I appreciate that and respect that. And that is the reason I am so humbled that you would include me on this podcast. I just wanted to say that about you and what a resource you have been for me.
Johnny, I appreciate that, but I think you are exaggerating a little bit, but I am glad to help any way I can, and not just you, but anybody that has some questions about things. As I near the end of my career, these last 5 to 10 years, maybe shorter, who knows, I really want to focus on helping to mentor young coaches and helping to pour into young coaches to help them, hopefully that they don't have to repeat the mistakes that I made, and that they can learn from the mistakes I made, and maybe I can pass on some knowledge, but not just in terms of strength training or weightlifting, but in terms of dealing with people. And that's one of the reasons I think we hit it off so well. As a mutual friend of ours, who we're going to have on this podcast hopefully next week, Jerry Palmieri, had really talked to me about when I first met him, and insisted about how you make the idea or the task of training somebody, how you make that so important as part of a bigger aspect of life, creating relationships, building trust, developing character, and Jerry's been a great resource to me, just as you've been a resource to me. So we'll call this the Mutual Admiration Society and hold it at that. I do want to thank everybody for tuning in today. We got a little bit off topic, but that's the best thing about this podcast. It's basically about us talking about different things that hopefully one or two of those nuggets is something that you can use in your own coaching journey. Please go ahead and, as we build this, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Give us some likes, give us some feedback. It doesn't have to be great feedback. It can be negative feedback. As long as it's respectful, we're fine with that. Anything that we can do to make this better, and some topics that you would like us to talk about with in the realm of authentic coaching. Coach, would you have anything to add to that?
I just say, hey, make this better by getting rid of that cotton picker from Mississippi, and you do the whole thing. And I would agree with that. But at any rate, yeah, Coach, Alvin Roy, Louis Ritchie, and Clyde Emery were the founders of our profession. Mr. Roy first, and those two followed soon thereafter. Coach, they're all deceased now, and I might have shortened their lives with all of the questions that I asked them and trips I made to watch them work their players. And at any rate, Coach, if those men who's I'm not even worthy of being in the same profession as them, if they could take the time to answer my questions and never once say, hey, you dummy, that might be the dumbest question I've ever heard. They never did that. They treated me like I was somebody, even though I was nobody. So I think that we all, especially us seasoned veterans, need to treat every coach that we encounter with respect and answer their questions with as though it's the most important question you've ever heard.
Coach, I wholeheartedly agree with that. Whenever I give a talk or I'm talking with coaches or even athletes, I say there's no such thing as a stupid question. I'd rather you ask that question right now than to hold it in, maybe create confusion somewhere. And again, if I don't have the answer to that question, I'm going to find somebody like Coach Johnny Parker from Mississippi and get that answer. And if Coach Johnny Parker doesn't know it, he'll send me to somebody who does. That's the beauty of this field, and I do think that one of the things that we should touch on in our next podcast when we're talking about authentic coaching is possibly authentically coaching coaches and giving back. Nothing gets me so disappointed as when somebody has the information that they've developed and they hold it to themselves and they could share it with somebody where it might help some kids down the line. I think that we only get better by sharing information, and we only get better by building relationships with each other. And in that way that we can build relationships with each other, that can transfer to building relationships with our athletes, and that can transfer for us helping them see value, feel special, and we can recognize and acknowledge those positive things in our lives. Thank you again, Coach. I'm going to sign off, and then I'm going to turn it over and let you sign off. And when we come back next week, we'll have something new to talk about with authentic coaching as the two of us talk about why we think relationships matter more than reps.
Coach, thank you again. It's an honor and a privilege to be in this same podcast as you. And Coach, yeah, this mentoring coaches, now that I'm retired, that's all I do, or all I try to do, is to mentor young coaches and help them avoid the mistakes that I made, and maybe tell them a few things that maybe they might want to reconsider. Also, Coach, I don't know if you want to hear this, but I've written up my beliefs about the principles of leadership. And, uh, if you want to fit that in next time, that'll be fine. If not, that's fine too. But hey, take care, Coach. And until next time.
Well, Coach Parker just did me a solid because he just created the topic of our next podcast, Principles of Coaching. We'll see everybody soon. Take care, and remember, it always is going to boil down to relationships.